Anne Bonny was not an ordinary girl. She was born around 1700 in Ireland, the daughter of a lawyer and a servant. To avoid trouble, her father moved the family to South Carolina, where Anne grew up. Even as a child, she was strong-willed, bold, and curious. She didn't like rules or dresses and often got into fights. Her father hoped she'd become a proper lady, but Anne wanted adventure. As a teenager, she married a sailor named James Bonny. Her father disapproved and disowned her. Anne and James moved to Nassau in the Bahamas, a place known as the Pirate Republic. It was filled with outlaws, sailors, and treasure hunters. In Nassau, Anne met the pirate captain Calico Jack Rackham. He was daring and full of charm, and Anne quickly fell in love with him. Calico Jack asked her to join his crew, not just as a companion, but as a pirate. Anne didn't hesitate. She dressed in men's clothes, carried pistols and a sword, and joined Calico Jack at sea. She wasn't just watching from the sidelines, she was ready to fight and lead. Her life as a pirate had begun, and she was about to make history on the high seas. Anne Bonny was more than a passenger. She became a full member of Calico Jack's crew aboard the Revenge. She dressed like a man, fought like one, and proved she belonged among the pirates. She helped plan attacks, boarded ships, and was known for her bravery. The crew didn't treat her differently. They saw how fierce she was with her pistols and sword. Some sailors didn't know she was a woman until much later. That didn't matter. What mattered was that Anne could fight, and she didn't back down from danger. Anne wasn't alone for long. She met another woman pirate, Mary Reed, who was also disguised as a man. At first, they didn't know each other's secret, but when they found out, they became close friends. Together, they were unstoppable. Anne, Mary, and Calico Jack made a strong team. They attacked merchant ships, took gold, and avoided Navy patrols. They shared their loot and lived freely on the sea. But being a pirate meant more than treasure. It meant living on the edge, always running from danger. Anne loved the freedom, but she also knew the risks were growing. Still, she stayed strong. This was the life she had chosen, and she was not afraid. Anne Bonny and Mary Reed became famous among pirates. They fought side by side, just as tough as any man on the crew. When battles broke out, they were often the last ones standing. Their courage amazed everyone, and they earned the respect of their shipmates. Together, they helped Calico Jack build a powerful reputation across the Caribbean. They captured ships full of gold, rum, and supplies. They celebrated victories and escaped tight situations, laughing as they sailed into the horizon. Anne and Mary were careful, but news of their actions spread. The British Navy had begun to crack down on pirates. Captains were ordered to hunt down outlaw ships and capture the crews. Anne and her friends were high on the wanted list. Even though the risk of being caught grew greater, Anne refused to quit. She believed in her strength and her choices. She didn't follow orders, she gave them. Life at sea was dangerous, but it was hers. As the months passed, their adventures became bolder. But one mistake would change everything. In 1720, Anne Bonny and her crew anchored near Jamaica. They believed the area was quiet and safe. But one night, while most of the crew was drinking and celebrating, a British Navy ship approached silently. It was a trap. When the soldiers attacked, many of the pirates were too drunk to fight. Calico Jack and most of the crew were captured quickly. But Anne and Mary didn't give up. They grabbed their weapons and stood on deck, shouting at the others to wake up and fight. With only a few pirates helping them, the women held off the Navy for as long as they could. But they were outnumbered. Eventually, Anne, Mary, and the rest of the crew were captured and taken to prison in Spanish Town, Jamaica. The pirates were locked up and told they would face trial soon. Calico Jack was found guilty and sentenced to hang. Before his execution, Anne was allowed to visit him. She looked at him calmly and said, "If you had fought like a man, you would not be hanged like a dog." Anne Bonny had lost her ship, her freedom, and her captain. But she still had her pride. Anne Bonny and Mary Reed were put on trial with the rest of the Revenge crew. The courtroom was full of people, eager to see the famous women pirates face judgment. They were charged with piracy, a crime punishable by death. The judge was strict, and the evidence was clear. But when asked for final words, Anne and Mary surprised the court. They both declared, "We are with child." This meant they were pregnant. According to the law, a pregnant woman could not be executed until after the baby was born. The judge delayed their sentences. While in prison, Anne and Mary were kept separate from the others. Life behind bars was hard. Sadly, Mary became ill and died in prison shortly after. Anne's fate became a mystery. Some believe her wealthy father paid for her release. Others say she escaped, but there are no clear records of what happened next. One thing was certain: Anne Bonny was not hanged. She had survived the trial, but her life as a pirate was over. After Mary's death and the end of the Revenge crew, Anne Bonny vanished from public records. Many believe her powerful father in South Carolina helped her go free. Others think she escaped on her own. Some stories say Anne returned to a quiet life, married again and had children. Others say she continued to travel under a different name, but no one knows for sure. What is certain is that Anne never returned to piracy. The sea she once ruled became too dangerous. The British Navy had ended the golden age of pirates, and many of Anne's old friends were gone. But Anne's fire didn't fade easily. Whether she lived in hiding or in peace, she had already made her mark. Her actions had shocked the world and changed the idea of who could be a pirate. By the time Anne Bonny reached her mid-20s, everything had changed. The pirate life she had once loved was gone. Her ship was captured, her crew scattered, and the sea was no longer safe. Anne lived quietly, away from the waters that had once made her famous. If she did return to South Carolina, as some believe, she likely lived under watch or changed her name to stay hidden. Anne had loved freedom more than anything, but now she had to live with her past, one full of treasure, danger, and unforgettable choices. The girl who once raised a sword on deck was now just a memory to most. But she was still alive, and that meant her story wasn't fully over. She had outlived many pirates, and even if the adventure had ended, Anne Bonny had survived. Anne Bonny's final years remain a mystery. Some believe she lived a long life, dying peacefully around the age of 80 in South Carolina. Others think she changed her identity and moved far from her past. What we do know is that she never returned to piracy. The young woman who once fought side by side with Mary Read and stood against a warship had grown older and quieter. She may have married again. Records mention a woman with her name having several children. If it was truly her, she lived far longer than most pirates ever did. Her pirate days were behind her, but they were never forgotten. From her bold childhood to her battles on the sea, Anne Bonny's life was full of action and courage. She didn't follow the rules of her time. She followed her own path, no matter how dangerous. And even if she never held a sword again, her name would always be tied to the sea.